Well, it is good to be finally doing this in front of you guys. So yeah, as Ashley mentioned, I'm a data science major, and I'll dive into kind of what that means. But this is my second year as an officer at Ratio Christi, and my junior year here at UM-Dearborn. And so when Scott approached me back in June about giving a talk, I was like, why not talk about something that I love to talk about? Why not talk about something that I understand and yet still applies to the topic of science as a whole? So a couple of different topics we'll be going over today. I'll briefly describe and go over what data science is, because I know that's not something that not a lot of people know about. Then we'll look at mathematics in the Bible and numbers in general, and then we'll look at a subsection of that called gematria, which I'll explain when we get to that point. So what is data science? How many of you have ever built something with Legos before in your life, right? Okay, so you get a box of Legos, right? You open it up, you pull everything out, you get the instructions out. What's the first thing you do before you start building? Throw the instructions away. Okay, free fall it, okay. Let's focus on the pieces. What do you do with the pieces before you start building?
By size and color.
Sort them by size and color, exactly. No, I'm a very organized in that aspect individual. I need to know what I'm working with. But how does that apply to data science, right? Well, data science is kind of like building a Lego set, right? The data is the Lego pieces that I have. So I'm given data, I take it, I sort it, I organize it, I analyze it, I see what I have. I don't have the finished product in front of me. My job isn't to build the final project. My job is to say, okay, I have these pieces. What can I build with these pieces? What are the possible ways for me to arrange these pieces in order to have something that makes sense? That's essentially what data science is in a nutshell. So there's obviously a process involved with that. There's a certain amount of steps that you have to go through in order to sort through data. So I thought, I'm not what you would call necessarily theologically adept. I can't stand up here and give an hour-long presentation on the problems with evolution. I can't stand up here and give an hour-long presentation on the fossil record and why the flood is true. I probably could with time, but that's not my strong suit, right? So I thought, why don't I apply my degree, what I'm learning, why don't I apply that to the Bible to hopefully better understand the Bible and how it works? And so that's kind of what I did through this entire process, is I kind of took my own theology, set it aside, and said, let's look at what the Bible actually says. Let's look at how it's designed and start from there. All right, so that's kind of the basis that we're starting from square one here. Some basic Bible foundation is the Bible was written over 1,500 years by 40 different authors. How many of you guys have played the game of telephone before at any point? Yeah. So you start with something, right, and that gets told to the next person and so on until the end. The people that come after you don't know what the previous statement was, correct? They just know what they're told, right? So the person at the end has no idea what was said before him. He just knows what was received. So it's hard enough when you have a group of 10 people playing telephone to sometimes get the right answer. But when you have a group of 40 people spread out over 1,500 years, that becomes an impossible task. Yet the Bible does it. It tells one continuous story from front cover to back cover. Everything is interwoven between each other. That should not be possible. Additionally, the Bible is written in 3 languages. It was written in Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic. Those are not 3 languages that merge easily with each other. Additionally, those 40 people spoke a variety of those 3 languages over the course of those 1,500 years. The story should not make one coherent sense in the original translation, and yet it does. And this is also just a fun little tidbit. The longest book in the Bible is Psalms, which is 43,734. That's a number of palindromes, same front and back. The book of Psalms is the exact middle of the Bible. So you're telling me that the exact middle of the Bible has the same number of words forward and backwards, and that's just a coincidence? That's off of the King James. I find that pretty dang cool. So we look at how books cross-reference each other as an example of how coherent they are throughout, right? And so just to hammer home the point of this should not be possible, this is the Quran, right? There's some cross-referencing in there, but not a lot. That's about a decent amount for a book in and of itself. In contrast, this is the Bible. Every single one of those lines is a cross-reference to a different portion of the Bible. And I imagine the designers of this visual had some fun with this, but what shape does that make? Rainbow, right? It looks kind of like a rainbow. The different colors represent different sections of the Bible, which is why it's visualized like that. But I just find that kind of cool. So that's the basics out of the way, right? So I looked at a book called by Josh McDowell called The New Evidence That Demands a Verdict. It's a rewrite in addition to Evidence That Demands a Verdict, which he wrote previously. It says, throughout the New Testament, the apostles appealed to two areas of the life of Jesus to establish his messiahship. One was the resurrection, and the other was fulfilled messianic prophecy. The Old Testament, written over a 1,000-year period, contains nearly 300 references to the coming Messiah. All of these were fulfilled in Jesus Christ, and they established a solid confirmation of his credentials as the Messiah. This book, by the way, fantastic read if you want more information after this talk. So McDowell, he identified 61 major prophecies. So he took those 300 and he kind of weeded them out to 61 major prophecies that had both a prophecy and then a fulfillment, okay? And he broke them down into subcategories. So he had prophecies concerning his birth, born of a virgin, born of the tribe of Judah, born at Bethlehem. Prophecies concerning his nature, he shall be a prophet, he shall be a priest. Prophecies concerning his ministry, he was preceded by a messenger. His ministry would be one of miracles. He would bring light to the Gentiles. Prophecies concerning events after his burial, he'd be seated at the right hand of God. He would ascend into heaven. Prophecies fulfilled in one day, that is the day that he was betrayed and then was crucified, sold for 30 pieces of silver, silent before accusers, mocked, and then bones not broken. So McDowell kind of takes these 61 and arranges them into different categories and provides a fulfillment for all of them. So then we enter into the mix, a book by Peter Stoner and Robert Newman that was republished in 2005, but it was originally written in the 1970s. That's called Science Speaks, Scientific Proof of the Accuracy of Prophecy and the Bible. It basically combines biblical analysis. So what Stoner did is he took and analyzed all those prophecies, and then he created a mathematical computation to try to prove how likely it was that those prophecies would come true. So he took kind of the reasoning out of it, and he went with straight like computational mathematics. He says in Science Speaks, if we can find these prophecies to be fulfilled in Christ, we will establish not only that Christ is the Messiah predicted in the Old Testament, but that those prophecies were given by God himself. For if they were not given by God, no man would have fulfilled any number of them, as will be evident later in this chapter. And he goes on in that chapter. In evaluating these prophecies, we shall have to answer this question regarding each prophecy. One man in how many men has fulfilled this prophecy? I realize that some will object to this question, saying that those prophecies were made with respect to Christ and no other man has or even can fulfill them. This is, of course, is true when you consider the mass of prophecies regarding Christ, but is not true of all individual prophecies. It was prophesied, for example, that Christ would be born in Bethlehem. Certainly other persons have been born in Bethlehem. It was prophesied that Christ would be crucified. Other men have been crucified. I certainly am not trying to be sacrilegious in asking these questions, but I am trying to look at the evidence entirely unbiased that I may better give a clear argument. So that's kind of the foundation of what Stoner did in his following, what's it called when you, I can't think of the word just blanked. In science, you run a, and not a problem, not an equation. I'll think of the word. Analysis. Yeah, kind of along those lines. I don't know the exact word I'm thinking of, but experiment. That's the word I'm looking for. Gosh, Josh. Wow. Data science major, y'all. So that's what he's trying to run in this experiment, is stripping everything away and just looking at what's the likelihood that one man would fulfill these prophecies. So, this next bit is going to be kind of boring for those of you that aren't mathematically inclined, but I'm going to try to make it as enjoyable as possible. What is probability, in case you've never understood what probability is? In short, probability is the measure of likelihood of an event occurring, expressed as a number between 0 and 1. So it's some sort of decimal number between 0 and 1, 1 being absolutely certain, 0 being no chance at all. The formula for probability is the probability of an event equals the number of favorable outcomes divided by the total number of outcomes. So take the roll of a dice, for example. Say I have a 6-sided die, numbers 1 through 6, and I say, what's the probability that a 4 will appear when I roll it? Well, number of favorable outcomes is 1. You have 1 4 on the die. You have 6 total outcomes, so the probability would be 1 6. I think that's like 17%. Easier example, flip of a coin, right? What's the probability that I'm going to get heads when I flip a coin? Well, 1 over 2. 2 total outcomes, one of those is a heads. Okay, so 50%. It becomes a little bit more dicey, no pun intended, when you add factors into there. For example, what's the probability that's going to snow in the next week, right? That's a lot more historical data, a lot more outcomes, but it's still possible to get a rough estimate of the probability there. As a note as well, odds, as you see them, if someone says there's a 1 in 2,000 or 20,000 chance that you're going to get bitten by a shark if you go swimming, it's basically the number of ways for an event to occur and then the number of ways for an event to not occur. So just a little bit of background for kind of some of the stuff that we're going to be looking at going forward. So Stoner specifically, he looked at 8 prophecies. So he's whittled those 61-ish down to roughly 8 prophecies. And he worked with a group of students to determine a probability for all of those prophecies. So he looked at the Bethlehem birth from Micah 5:2. That's where the prophecy was given. And he calculated a roughly 280,000 chance that that would happen. Preceded by a messenger from Isaiah 40 and Malachi 3:10. 1 in 1,000 entering Jerusalem on a donkey. 1 in 100 betrayed by friends / hands and feet pierced, both from Zechariah 13:6. 1 in 1,000. Sold for 30 pieces of silver. 1 in 1,000. The specifics of the silver pieces, so the fact that none of them would be returned, they would be used to buy a plot of land. Also from Zechariah 11:13, 1 in 100,000, silent before the accusers, 1 in 1,000, and then the crucifixion, 1 in 10,000. So he worked out these probabilities of each of these separately events happening, right? Of one person fulfilling any one specific of these. So if you take all those numbers and you multiply all of them together, you get 2.8 times 10 to the 28, which written out and simplified is 1 followed by 28 zeros. That is the odds of roughly one person fulfilling all of these prophecies. This is where things get a little bit scientific, but I'm going to try my best to explain this. So if you take the time of the prophecies and you go to present day, right? So the time of the prophecies to present day. And you assume the total population since that time where the prophecies were made is 10 to the 11th. So 1 followed by 11 zeros. If you divide those two numbers, you find the chance that any man might have lived down to the present time from the time those prophecies were made and fulfilled all 8 prophecies. So not just 1, 2, but all 8. 1 in 10 to the 17. That's 1 followed by 17 zeros. To make things a little bit simpler, let's use a visual. Say I take a coin, right? Say I take a dollar coin, and I mark that coin with Sharpie, with an X, right? And then I take that coin and I throw it into a stack of coins 2 feet deep, okay? And I take that same stack and I completely cover Texas with those stacks of coins. And then I ask one of you at random to go into that stack of coins that's 2 feet deep covering Texas. And I say, find the coin that I marked on the first try. That is that probability. That's the probability of one person fulfilling 8 prophecies from the Bible. It's the same chance the prophets would had of writing those 8 prophecies and having them all come true in any one man from their day to present time, providing they wrote using their own wisdom, right? So by chance it happened. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? If you take that 8 prophecies, which we established as this 10 to the 28 number, right? If you take that and expand it to 48, so we're not even covering all 300, we're just talking about 48, and you use a very conservative 1 in 10 to the 21, you get the chance you get this number right here, which is 1 followed by 157 zeros. For reference, the number of known atoms in the universe is approximately 10 to the 80. This is unheard of that one person could fulfill 48 prophecies, and yet one person did. So why am I saying this? If I came to you with a business proposal and it looked very sound on paper, right? I had all the logistics worked out, I had the paperwork worked out, everything was lined up, and it was a very good idea. But I said the one caveat with it, the one downside to it, was it had a 1 in 10 to the 17th chance of success. What would you say to me?
No deal.
No deal, exactly. It would be a very quick no deal, right? You wouldn't have to think about it for a second. So why do Christians with unwavering doubt place all of our hope on this 1 in 10 to the 17th chance? Faith, yeah. We take that leap of faith and we say, yes, I understand the chance of it is very small, but it's because the chance of it is very small that I believe in it. It's that circular reason of it's so improbable that it has to be probable, right? So that's kind of the mathematics of the actual Bible itself, looking at the prophecies, right? So we've established that the Bible itself has a backing for being true, just based on the prophecies. I haven't brought any arguments. I've just looked at probabilities and reasoning. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. But as a data scientist, I can't ever just look at the surface, right? I can't just ever say, here's the data, let me present it to you, we're done. I always have to go deeper. I need to look at the patterns. What kind of patterns are shown in the Bible? So, I want to take a deeper dive for a little bit here into some specific numbers in the Bible. And you can go through, when I was doing my research, I found a website that went, I think it was numbers 1 through 40 and then a few other ones. And you can give some reasoning for each and every single one of those numbers. But there are the patterns that develop within the Bible. For example, take the number 3, which is known in Hebrew as the number of divine perfection. There were 3 patriarchs of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. 3 sons of Noah. 3 days Jonah spent in the belly of the fish. 3 years of Jesus' ministry. 3 days until Jesus' resurrection. 3 members of the Trinity. All right? Okay, it's one number. That's not that bad. All right, 7, which is known as the number of spiritual perfection. In Hebrew, 7, which is the word for 7, it's Shabbat, which means to be full. It's literally a number of fullness. God rested on the 7th day. It took 7 years to build the temple. There were 7 major feasts in the Hebrew religion. The book of Revelation is filled with the number 7 repeating over and over and over again. 8 is known as the number of beginning. It was 7 plus 1. It's the first cubic number, 2 times 2 times 2, which was used as a measurement, known as the cubit in Bible times. 8 people were saved on the ark. The 8th day of anything was considered the consecration day. Elijah performed 8 miracles in the Old Testament. There were 8 beatitudes in Matthew. Jesus rose on the 8th day of the week, based on the Hebrew calendar. Fun fact, scientists have discovered 88 constellations. 10 is the number of ordinal perfection. We use a base 10 system when we're counting. Noah was the 10th generation from Adam. Abraham, the 10th generation from Shem, who is one of the sons of Noah. There are 10 commandments, 10 plagues, 10 clauses in the Lord's Prayer. The northern kingdom of Israel is made up of 10 tribes. So this number 10 appears as well. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. 12, known as the number of governmental perfection. We use 12 months in a year. We use 12 hours or 24 hours in a day, depending on which clock you run. 12 tribes of Israel, 12 spies sent to Canaan, 12 apostles, 12 gates, foundations in the New Jerusalem in Revelation. There's also 144,000, that's a number that's mentioned in Revelation as well. 40 I call the frequent flyer because it appears everywhere in the Bible, all throughout. Noah spent 40 days and nights on the ark. Moses' life can be broken into 3 40-year segments. He spent 40 years in Egypt, 40 years in the wilderness, and then was 80 when God called him for another 40-year ministry. For 40 years, Israel wandered. For 40 years, David ruled. 40 days, Jesus was in the wilderness. 40 days after the resurrection, Jesus taught before he was ascended into heaven. So there's these patterns of numbers that appear all throughout the Bible. And I don't think that's a coincidence, right? I don't think it's a coincidence that these numbers in particular appear over and over again. The patterns don't infer correlation, meaning patterns don't mean that there's a reasoning behind things. They do, however, exist for a reason. Why do these numbers repeat over and over again? Is it possible that mathematical and numerical harmony are layered within the Bible? Is it possible that there's a reason, a foundation for this? Let's go just a little bit deeper. The last topic I want to introduce is a topic called gematria, all right? So gematria is the practice of assigning numerical values to letters. It was used first by the Greeks and then by the Jews. A modern day, for example, would be to take our alphabet of 26 letters and assign a numerical value where A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, and then creating some sort of pattern. If you work that out, that says hello, right? That's a very rudimentary example of gematria. But it is what the Greeks and the Jews did with all of their letters and numbers. This is the Hebrew version of gematria. There's a few different versions. This is the most commonly accepted. So the Hebrew alphabet had 22 letters, and then it used 5 as kind of a repeat on the end here. But each one of those was assigned a value, 1 through 9, 10 through 90, and then 100 through 400 is generally the base common one, and then these 5 are used in a separate version of gematria, where they try to get that full table of 100 to 900. So within Hebrew words, they would assign a value to each of these letters, or each of these letters. Some cool examples of gematria. If you take the Greek version and you take the name Jesus in Greek, which is Iousis, the gematria is 800. And there's the breakdown of how those numbers add up, but it's 888, which 8 is, again, one of those numbers of beginning, right? In fact, all the names for Jesus are multiples of 8. Christ, Lord, Savior, Emmanuel, Messiah, Son, all multiples of 8. They all have this common thread where Jesus is that new beginning, right? And that's a message that we hear throughout Scripture. So that's an example where the numbers back up the message that we're hearing. Last thing I want to do is look at one illustrative example of this numerical pattern that appears in the Bible. And it's the very first verse in the Bible. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? If you've read the Bible before, it's one of the first verses, it's the very first verse you read, but it's one of the first verses that people tell you to read. And especially when people are looking at science, this is the number one verse that people try to debunk. Because if in the beginning God didn't create, then that casts doubt on all Christianity, right? So why do I think that there's maybe a little bit of pattern in the Bible? Well, if we combine everything we've kind of talked about here, and you look at the Hebrew breakdown of that verse itself, it roughly translates, in the beginning created God. This is kind of a bridge word, and then the heavens and the earth. So you have 3 nouns, God, heavens, earth, and then a few other words in here, created being the lone verb. If you break down each of those verbs or words into gematria and you assign numerical values to all the letters, this is the breakdown of what it gets. So you have, coincidentally, 7 words in Genesis 1:1 in the Hebrew. Those 7 words contain 28 letters, which is 4 times 7. And here's the breakdown of how that's divvied out. So you know I'm not just making this up. If you take the 3 nouns, God, heaven, and earth, it adds up to 777. The first 3 words contain 14 letters, and the last 4 words contain 14 letters. So 2 times 7, 14. Another repeating. If you take the total sum of all the words within Genesis 1:1, it comes out to a number that is not a multiple of 7. Aha, Josh, I've got you. Well, hold on a second. 2,701 is not a multiple of 7, but it happens to be 73 times 37, both of which are considered prime numbers and have great significance in the numerical value in and of itself. And I also think it's really cool that they're exact mirrors of each other. It's a palindrome again. The man behind all this work is a man by the name of Ivan Panin. He was originally a committed atheist and a nihilist, and he set out doing this research to prove that the Bible was not true. But it was his eventual discovery of such biblical numerical patterns as the one in Genesis 1:1 that convinced him of the existence of God and that the Bible must constitute a divinely inspired text, mathematically impossible to create intentionally, let alone by happenstance. In other words, there's no way this could just happen by chance. Genesis 1:1, of course, is not the only case in point, and was not, in fact, the verse that piqued Panic's interest and started him on his journey of investigation. That was John 1:1. Over a 50-year span of work, he collected some 40,000 pages of such calculations. 40,000 pages of patterns within the Bible. Patterns that by themselves, as we showed very early on, could not have happened by chance. There had to be some sort of thread that combined over 1,500 years, 40 different authors, 3 different languages. This is not a story that should make sense from beginning to end, but it does, and there's a pattern within it all. Could everything happen by chance? Yes. There's a 1 in 10 to the 999 that all of this could have happened by chance. Is it a merely coincidental or artificially manufactured by a human author? Again, there is a very, very small chance. But the theory that I like better is that it's a result of a divine author and tells a complete story from beginning to end. So by looking at these numbers that repeat themselves, by looking at the mathematical computations within the Bible, it allows us to understand that, yes, there was an author behind this all. Yes, there was somebody that wrote the story, that told the story. And then it was translated to perfection over 1,500 years. And that God, from the very beginning in Genesis 1:1, doesn't make mistakes in his word. It says in 2 Timothy that all scripture is God-breathed. God had an influence into every single word that was written in the Bible. And so I'm not talking to you today as somebody who can refute evolution or stand up here and debate somebody for an hour. But I'm talking to you as somebody who has gone through the data, who has combed through it all, organized it, and come to a conclusion based on it. And that was the purpose of my talk today. So, thank you guys for listening. That's all I have. Thank you. Do you guys have any, I want to leave it open for any questions, or for those of you that came in late, if you guys have any questions at all, I'm happy to briefly go back over something, but I want to leave that open.
I have an observation about the prophecies and the mathematical probability of just those 47 or
48, yeah.
48 prophecies. Okay, and then how you were discussing it. So it seems to me that what's significant about those that probability, 10 to the 80th power, right?
This is the one for the prophecy. 10 to the
157 power, that just 48 prophecies could be fulfilled in one man.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
What's significant is not that it's such a low probability that didn't happen. It's that it is such a low probability that did happen.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So it's not that it's not that we're putting our faith in such a low probability like anyone before Jesus' time would have done. It's that because that's stupid.
Right.
Like to put your faith beforehand in something that has a 1 in 10 to the 157th power of happening is absurd and all those words that you can think of is ridiculous. No, the reason why you can put your faith, that we can put our faith in that, is because it did happen.
Right.
And we know it happened. It's because it's history now. There was a man who came and fulfilled all those prophecies plus more. And now it's easy, if you know that, it's easy to believe that.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah. No, 100%. 100%. Great comment, Scott.
Yeah. Because I want it late, could just back to 127.
I will briefly go over this. So I looked at a book called Science Speaks by Peter Stoner, where he basically took 8 prophecies from the Bible and assigned probabilities to each of them, and then multiplied those out. If you looked at 8 probabilities, it would be, or 8 prophecies, the chance of one man fulfilling them, which is kind of the basis of his argument, was 1 in 10 to the 17, which is an insane number. But if you essentially take that and expand it to 48 prophecies, that's where you get this 10 in 100 to the 57.
Could you tell me how how we got the probabilities of someone fully prophecy?
Yeah. So take the Bethlehem verse, for example. So he worked with a group of students, and they looked at, the region and the area of its time, and they said, okay, the chance that somebody was born in Bethlehem, right, was roughly 1 in 280,000, right? So 1 in 280,000 people were born in Bethlehem.
Yeah, based on the population.
Based on the population, right? Based on numbers from that, well, not from that time, but numbers that they could.
Isn't the population and all the possible places where someone could have been born?
Right. So I said that probability is the number of favorable outcomes. So in this case, somebody born in Bethlehem, and then the total number of outcomes would be all the people born, right? So if you divide those two numbers, that's where you get the 1 in 280,000 people. And so you just kind of worked that out. Some of these they had to roughly estimate because entering Jerusalem on a donkey wasn't something that was noted a lot, but they just had to, assume it happened roughly 1 in 100 or whatever. And then all the other things as well. So he was able to work out with this group of students the probabilities of each of those events happening. And that turned into the 1 in 10 to the 17 that I was presented there. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I found it, I was like, oh, this is fun. And this was a book written in the 1970s. So it wasn't like it was you had modern mathematical computation and stuff. No, it was we have to sit down with pen and paper and work this out. So.
Again, I came here late. Yeah, I can make the assumption that it's about the numbers, probability of Christ coming and fulfill all the prophecies of being the Messiah. Basically, he said what we truly said he was. Right. Just to say, is that correct? We went over to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So roughly, a stoner was basically looking at the question: one man and how many men has fulfilled the prophecy? So he was taking okay, here's what it says in the Bible. I understand that, but how likely is it that would happen?
Okay.
Fulfilled by one man, right? And it said he's not trying to be sacrilegious. He's just trying to look at the evidence entirely unbiased from a mathematical point of view.
Yeah.
And that was the basis for where he got all those numbers from.
Yeah, and that part, so that's very important for our faith because in modern times, there's another argument debate. They will say, oh, Mary just made an excuse so she won't get stoned to death. But then, most people don't ask them is, okay, if Mary did fake Jesus being a Messiah, then how did all these other prophecies coincidentally came true? Was Mary behind the scenes? Nothing that happened? How? Right.
And so my point in this specific section was to say that, it is hard to believe that, this all could have happened by chance. There had to be some sort of logical flow within everything and some sort of overarching design with everything in order for everything to line up as it is.
Yeah.
So good question.